still sleepy. All right, Krishna. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, world. Let me get our first translation set up here. Yep, I'm far less ready today. Okay, good. We're still on chapter 8 here. And we're doing the second verse cluster, which is coincidentally another exactly 4 verses, 5, 6, 7, 8. In chapter 8. I'm so curious. I want to go through the whole Gita and see if it's exactly 4 verses every time. That'd be very interesting. Where each line has 4 verses, and each verse has 4 lines, and each cluster has 4 verses, and each chapter, well, is different. Each chapter cannot have the same number of verse clusters, unless they're not exactly 4 verses for each cluster. This is definitely interesting for me to study, but also doesn't really matter all that much, but that's okay. Please pardon my appearance here. I have my pajamas on. All right, I'm going to blow my nose, and then we're going to do some glorifying mantra. Welcome back, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, as it is. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Okay, first let's do the literal translation of verses 5 through 8 from H.D. Goswami. Here we go. At end time, one who departs remembering me alone while releasing the body goes to my state of being. Of this there is no doubt. Indeed, one surely attains the very state. Sorry, I thought I was maybe still muted. So continuing on from verse 6. Indeed, one surely attains the very state that one remembers while quitting the body. Kaunteya, whatever it may be, for one has always caused that state of being to be. Therefore, at all times, remember me and fight. With reason and mind focused on me, you will doubtlessly come to me alone. With unwavering mind linked by disciplined yoga, one reaches the supreme divine person, always thinking of him. There's one footnote here, 146. One bears personal responsibility for one's future states of being. Yeah, so there's the law of karma is constantly active. So just as what you do now affects what happens tomorrow, what you do at the last moment of death affects the next moment after death. I mean, it's literally that simple. And this is why I love the Bhagavad Gita. It is indeed a spiritual science. Okay, let's get up to Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. Here we go. Verse 5. And whoever at the time of death quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. Interesting thing to note here. Every single verse in this cluster has just a 1 or 2 paragraph purport, very small purports. There's one, and only verse 8 has 2 paragraphs, which is so interesting. That's another indication that these are definitely ordered by cluster, because verse 8 is the most boring and uneventful. There's nothing new in the final verse. It just summarizes everything from before. So the key word in verse 5 here is mad bhavam, literally my bhav, right? So, which is translated word for word and colloquially as my nature. But I believe H.D. Goswami translated it as my state of being, which you could see as synonymous with my nature. It's not exactly a different translation. Essentially, it's not different, but it is maybe more precise. Anyway, this is a really interesting verse. It's probably my favorite of this cluster. So on the one hand, Krishna says, well, you're not going to attain me for sure, guaranteed, meaning you're not going to be right at my, lotus feet sitting next to Radharani and Lakshmi Devi and Balaram and whatever. You're just going to attain my nature, my state of being. Maybe you won't attain me. You won't attain the highest place with me, but you will attain my state of nature. And on the other hand, Krishna is saying, well, simply by remembering, you can at once attain the highest nature. And I think this is like kind of a nod back to chapter 7, or maybe it was chapter 6. I think it was chapter 6 that was really focusing on Ashtanga yoga and all the really difficult yogas one can practice. And in the end summary of that chapter is like, don't. It's like, why bother? Just focus on Krishna, and then you get Krishna, and Krishna is the highest thing, the end of all goals. So why bother something else? Why? All you have to do is remember Krishna at one important moment. And the word smaran is used for remembering in this verse, but in later verses, a different word is used. But here, smaran is the same as from the verse in Bhagavatam, the 9 processes of devotional service, which I believe is in the 7th canto, and that's Prahlad Maharaj speaking that verse, I believe. It's in my notes somewhere. Even so, as Prabhupada states in the purport, while remembering may be a simple task, like simple in theory, just remember, like it's a simple word with a simple meaning to it, right? This is actually not even possible for, quote, the impure soul who has not practiced Krishna consciousness in devotional service, unquote. And one thing I really like about this verse cluster and why the purports are perhaps so short is because the actual technique and effective practice to achieve this end is given explicitly by Prabhupada, and it is to chant the Maha Mantra. And then he spells it out in the purport here, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, / Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So that slash is really significant there. It's saying that even though the Maha Mantra is one mantra, it's actually 2 parts. It's actually, and there's many ways to divide it, right? It's two parts. It's two main parts. And then and when you do it in kirtan, it's also two parts. There's the call mantra and the response mantra. And then within one part, there's the Hare Hare, the Krishna Krishna, the Hare Hare, the Rama Rama. So there's two parts within two parts. It's divided evenly and nicely on purpose, just as every single verse in the Bhagavad Gita, as far as I know, has exactly 4 lines. And most of these verses are clustered into 4. Part of it, maybe H.D. Goswami would say, is this is simply the culture at the time. Just like, in certain times in ancient Greece, there was a standard meter for every poetry that would use. And you could say the same for 5,000 years ago when this Bhagavad Gita was spoken. Although, in both cases, ancient Greece and ancient India, we're dealing with really intelligent people here who don't just follow just for the sake of following, and they don't just arbitrarily make things up. So it's both true at the same time. On the one hand, this meter, the math involved here is on purpose and genius. And then on the other hand, this is just how it was done at that time. In the same way that, if you want to publish music today, you have to publish on a streaming service. Otherwise, no one will listen to it. You don't have to, but if you want people to actually listen to your music, you have to use the internet now. That's just how it works, being alive today. I should qualify that and say large numbers of people to listen to it, because there are still people who, make CDs and vinyls for their small communities, and their communities love it, and that's great. You can still totally do that. And physical media is still the golden standard for music, like recording using analog equipment and producing vinyl records. That's still the gold standard because it makes a higher quality product. And then by the time it's digitized, it loses some of its sound quality, but it also gains immense scalability, which is how you make money. And it's hard to operate without money these days. Now, after mentioning the Maha Mantra, Prabhupada says how should we do it? Well, incessantly, which to me is kind of obvious, but it is important to put it there. It's obvious to me because I have a strong psychology background, and I know that it's just conditioning. So if we're talking about remembering Krishna at the time of death, or remembering, let's just say X, we'll just do algebra. You want to remember X at a certain moment in your life, the final moment in your life. Well, that's going to be very easy if you just practice X all the time up until that final moment. Then it'll be second nature, conditioning. And this is why I started doing japa. It wasn't because I was part of ISKCON and people told me to. It was because I had read the Gita. And I was practicing and studying and living the Gita for like 2 years, maybe 3 years, until I finally started to figure, maybe I'll see if I can meet another devotee or something. Maybe I can find some temple in the world that has Bhagavad Gita. And I literally had no idea that. I just found this book randomly. I didn't know it was a whole religion. I had no idea. And so as I was reading through it, I said, oh yeah, that mantra is pretty cool. And like Lord Chaitanya, that sounds like a cool guy. Like I had no idea what any of this really was. And the first ISKCON I went to was Mayapur, as it so happened. And yeah, so everyone had their own japa bag and they were chanting japa around. And I was like, that's interesting. I guess, should I do that? And I was, and they said, oh, it's 16 rounds. And I was like, oh, that's a lot. And I was, going through my head, like, can I actually bring this in my life, the exact number and a very high number like that? Because I would chant the mantra, purely, to be honest, not without, I don't mean without offenses, but I mean, I would chant it only spontaneously when I wanted to. And it would be oftentimes less than a round per day because I was just busy working and doing different things. But when I wanted to chant, I would chant. And if I was busy, I wouldn't chant. But, as I was thinking about whether or not to start this whole japa 16 rounds process, I immediately thought of this verse and I was like, oh, this is great. If for nothing else, maybe I fail at ISKCON, I never get initiated, whatever. If everything else fails, but at least by just doing the mantra this many times, I know at the time of death, it'll be much easier to remember Krishna. And it's that simple. As I mentioned, as reading the literal translation, the footnote that H.D. Goswami left, we're all responsible for our own state of being. Whatever we do today affects what happens tomorrow. So that's how I started doing japa. And because I like Krishna and already had experience, from the very beginning, it was not hard to do 16 rounds, to be honest. There was only, even before I was initiated, there was only one time for a few months where I did 8 rounds instead of 16 rounds. And that's when I was in China and my workload doubled. All of a sudden, I had to go to this whole new school and prepare lessons. That was really hard. And I think I was justified in doing less rounds for like maybe 1 or 2 months. But then I was used to doing only 8, and then I got comfortable doing only 8, and then I felt bad. I felt like I was cheating or something. I felt empty. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll just go back to 16 rounds again. And then I've been doing that ever since. And I have not found anything that can really take me away from it. There's some things I would like, I could benefit by having that extra time to like learn Korean while I'm in Korea or do some yoga, help my body out more. There's many good things, sattvic, I mean that literally, good things I could do. But is there anything as transcendental, as beneficial, as significant as chanting Maha Mantra in the japa form? No, there really isn't. So it's really hard to, once you get going, it's actually kind of hard to stop when you actually understand this properly. So we should chant. How do we chant? We do it incessantly, and we do it as Lord Chaitanya told us to in the Sri Siksastaka. It means more tolerant than the tree, humbler than the grass, offering all respect to others without requiring respect in return. Oh boy, I got to work on that. Yeah, it's how can you love Krishna if you don't love his parts and parcels? Once again, it's another very, very simple absolute truth. This also is, it's against ethics. It's against the Aristotle ethics I'm used to. The whole point of respect is that it is reciprocal and fair, meaning if someone does something worthy of respect, they get respect. And if they're not worthy of respect, they don't get respect. That's why it's an ethical practice. But to just offer all respect and not require any in return, have zero expectation, zero hint at it. Oh, it might be nice if, you reciprocate a little bit with me. This is Aristotle talks about this for generosity. That's how you give things to other people. You give money, you give wealth, you give gifts in that state of requiring nothing in return. But honor and dishonor should be done a little bit differently. Unless you're a magnanimous man, then you simply give honor without expecting it in return because you know they have nothing to give you in return. And magnanimity is a virtue mentioned here in the Gita. So that could be the way to do it. That may be how Prabhupada did it, where on the one hand, he knew he was, simply following the instructions of his Guru Maharaj. He was just being a disciple, actually. That's why he was Swami, is because he was disciple. But, he also knew, and he talked about very explicitly how degraded and subhuman this whole world has become. So on some level, he knows I actually am kind of, maybe he's not thinking it, but he knows like he is better than others. Maybe not ethically, but like he knows that from their position, they don't have anything to give him. He wants Krishna and they can't give him Krishna. They can't give him anything. And whatever he can give to them, he will only accept it and do something good with it for their benefit. And that is a natural state of magnanimity where, you give me a gift, that's fine. If not, that's fine too, and I have so much to give. I have the Supreme Lord. I have this absolute truth. I have everything to give. And what do I have to receive? Perhaps nothing. One thing I'm still stuck with, though, is that society needs to function properly. So the rules for respect are higher than the rules for etiquette. I'm thinking in my mind about my coworkers here in Korea, but then again, I guess in America, it's totally justified to have this focus on etiquette because there's no respect given and no etiquette either. So maybe we got to start at etiquette and work our way up to respect for this to function at a societal level. Yikes. Let's move on to verse 6. And this is the main one. Chapter 8, verse 6. This is the science. Here's the spiritual science of it. This is it's one sentence. In English, it's one sentence. And this is why I do japa. From the beginning to the middle, all the way to the very end. Now, there are some times where, I do like 12 rounds and I might think, I think that's enough. And then I'll keep doing it because I made the vow, so there is the initiation vow helps me do exactly 16, but the fundamental reason why I'm chanting Maha Mantra has not changed. It is all stated in this verse, quote, "Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail," unquote. Might as well just read the whole purport. It's so short. So what is this verse? This is the second verse in the cluster, and we are now given the technical reason why this process works that the previous verse told us about and what to do. Why does it work? That remembering Krishna at death, one attains Krishna's nature, and there's no doubt about it. Well, it's now given in this verse why that works and how that works. And it's not just that we get Krishna's nature if we remember Krishna, it's that we get whatever nature we focus on. So in the purport, Prabhupada mentions Bharat Maharaj, who was thought of a deer at the time of death, and so was transferred to that form of life. But because he was so advanced as a soul, he, even as a deer, he could remember his past activities. Of course, the cumulative effect of the thoughts and actions of one's life influence one's thoughts at the moment of death. Therefore, the actions of this life determine one's future state of being. And this is another great support or analog to one of the proofs for reincarnation given by H.D. Goswami is that we are reincarnating within this life. So the reincarnation into the next life is just a continuation of what we are already doing. Scientifically speaking, every cell in our body dies and is reborn every 7 years. We have a whole new body every 7 years. So an analog to this is, if you're a psychologist like me, would be hypnosis. Hypnosis is not some special thing that happens in normal times. Hypnosis is happening all the time. And what we call hypnosis is just simply simply taking a moment and focusing your attention on that natural process that's always happening, of suggestion and conditioning responses and imagination. This is all just totally natural. There's nothing unnatural about hypnosis. It's just we call it hypnosis when someone's really good at it, basically. Just finishing off the purport here from Prabhupada. If one is transcendentally absorbed in Krishna's service, then his next body will be transcendental, spiritual, not physical. Therefore, the chanting of Hare Krishna is the best process for successfully changing one's state of being to transcendental life. And once again, Prabhupada states again explicitly what is the actual technique, the practice that is best suited to get us there. It is chanting Hare Krishna. Now, in this purport, he doesn't, write down the entire mantra, and he doesn't say Maha mantra either. He just says chanting Hare Krishna. That's fine. I'm not judging. I'm just saying it's interesting. And it should be known. If you're really reading and paying attention, taking it seriously, you should know what that means by now. And if not, just go back to the previous verse. Okay, verse 7. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. Manaha buddhihi, mind and intellect. Oh, anusmara. This means go on remembering. So what Krishna is literally saying here is, therefore, always go on remembering, always, all the time, go on remembering me as you fight. Also, unto me, surrender your mind and your intellect, and surely you will attain me beyond a doubt. So, and this is a great example of a verse where you really want to look at both translations, because the English translation, it says activities dedicated to me. That's a beautiful translation that really helps us live our life properly. Dedicated is just a really beautiful word in English that works perfectly for this translation here. And I knew as soon as I read that that's like what I've been doing. as an English teacher living in Korea with like very little devotee association, why does it work spiritually for me? It's because this work, it's I'm like Arjuna, where I'm doing my fight when I'm in the classroom. And maybe the kids don't want to work or they don't want to do something, and I'm fighting to get them to do their duty, and I'm doing, it's really, it's like sattvic, and it's a noble activity, and for me it's a natural thing I can do to dedicate to Krishna. I can say, this is good work, man, and I do it for you. I do it for them too, of course, like. And when I'm in the classroom, I only focus on that. I don't have mental bandwidth to just be, oh, Krishna first, and these students are, lesser. Da, 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 da. No, it's the opposite of that. But then as soon as I switch classes and I start chanting a few mantras, that's exactly what happens. Because I have to, a lot of times I'm going up a flight of stairs to switch classes, and I chant at least a few mantras during that switch, and it's like bing bang boom. It like perfectly anchors my life into place why I'm here. And it's nice also that I get obvious signs from like my boss that like, here's a raise, we want you to stay another year. Like, that's really nice. I don't have that in my life in America ever. The only time I can remember is with the devotees I got to live with. They're like, oh, we want you to stay. And I could do that, but so many things are degraded in that country. I could only be brahmachari. It's the only thing I could do in America. And I could only do that with people I really, really trust and count on and whatever. Oh, that reminds me, I have an email to send to a lovely devotee, Prabhupada disciple friend. He's going to love it. Wow, this is the shortest purport of all the verses in the cluster, so I think I'll read the whole purport, but let's finish my notes first. Oh, yeah, so dedicate. So what Krishna literally says is, remember me as you fight, remember me, think of me. But it's remember is the perfect word, and that's why dedicate and remember go together so nicely. It's because if Krishna said, think of me as you fight, then you can't really fight, because like when you're fighting, what you're thinking is, okay, like I got to shoot one arrow over there, and then the next arrow, but he's coming behind me. Like you're going to be focused on the fighting. But remembering is kind of a back of the mind, background of consciousness activity. And that is how you can do it properly, where, whatever you have your duty to do, you do that prescribed duty, and you remember Krishna. And as much as possible, your mana, your mind, and your buddhi, intellect, especially spiritual intellect, focused on Krishna as much as possible, you will attain me without doubt. So buddhi, mind, I don't think we need to go into, but buddhi, in this sense, could mean like when you're trying to figure out what to do. Oh, what's the next best thing to do for my classes? Or Arjuna's like, well, what's the next war I'm going to fight in or whatever? You think about it in terms of Krishna. So as opposed to in terms of a demigod, or in terms of what's good for my career, or, that reminded me, I did a interview for Vietnam, and interviewer kept asking me, oh, what about your career? What are your goals for your career? I was like, bitch, I don't have a career. Pardon my language. I didn't actually say that in the interview, but it just so stumped me. I was like, I don't live in that world. I did not know how to respond. Like, I do technically have a career because I have, I've been doing the same thing for a decade, and like A psychologist observing my life would say, yes, he has a career, and that career is a teacher. But from my own perspective, I have a religion. I don't have a career, I have a religion. And it's my religion that allows me to have a career. And so I do things that are good for my religion based on what's good for Krishna and so on. That's why I didn't go to Vietnam, because it's better for God. It's better for Krishna. I'm here in Korea, which is why I'm in Korea. And in this, a lot of times it really just comes down to the interviewer. I had a really good interview with this school in Korea, and then I came here, and I had a really bad interview with Vietnam. They didn't even accept me, even though I have much higher qualifications than probably most other teachers they're accepting. It's all because that interviewer and her feminist ideology, most likely. They're very anti-man in the ESL market in Vietnam. Perhaps for a good reason. A little bit of it is a good reason. Anyway, so be it. So be it. Arjuna and all of us should always think of Krishna in the form of Krishna. And at the same time, we have to keep doing our duties. Activities dedicated to me, dedicated to Krishna, that can also mean in his honor. So we can remember Krishna, and dedication can be a form of remembering, but can also be doing it in his honor. So if, like, let's say, for instance, you are forgetful, or your mind and intelligence is lapsing, is not thinking of Krishna that much, and you do some great deed, and then you have some acceptance speech for the award you're given for this great work. Well, it's in that moment when you can say, I dedicate this to Krishna. I did this for Krishna. And that's actually really romantic, right? It's really kind of special, especially if, you do that real serendipitously and not like, oh, I was lazy with my bhakti and I'll just dedicate it and then I get all those points back. Ooh, look at me. But no, if you're really like sincerely and serendipitously think, oh yeah, how did I get here? How could I do this great work? And who is it for? Oh yeah, it's actually for Krishna. And you say that publicly in front of many people, that's very nice. And once again, Prabhupada states explicitly that chanting the mantra achieves this end perfectly. So let's read the whole purport this time. This instruction to Arjuna is very important for all men engaged in material activities. The Lord does not say that one should give up his prescribed duties or engagements. One can continue them and at the same time think of Krishna by chanting Hare Krishna. This will free one from material contamination and engage the mind and intelligence in Krishna. By chanting Krishna's names, one will be transferred to the supreme planet, Krishna Loka, without a doubt. My voice changed there, and it brought a whole bunch of different thoughts. I wasn't focused. But I really want to change my voice to get it a little lower, not because I want to sound like a more sexy man, but because actually my voice hurts, and the lower, kind of more relaxed bassiness that comes through is less of a strain on my throat. So I'm going to try and continue this purely for those reasons. Verse 8. He who meditates on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he, O Partha, Arjuna, is sure to reach me. This verse is clearly the conclusion of the verse cluster. Nothing new is added here. It is a neat summary. Prabhupada states again, the key theme here is remembering Krishna. The chanting is the most important thing, But Prabhupada admits in the last paragraph that there are different forms and features, such as Rama and Narayana, and that is okay to focus on as well. Also, in the first paragraph, Prabhupada states, quote, by this practice of chanting and hearing the sound vibration of the Supreme Lord, one's ear, tongue, and mind are engaged. This mystic meditation is very easy to practice, and it helps one attain the Supreme Lord. Purusham means enjoyer. Although living entities belong to the marginal energy of the Supreme Lord, they are in material contamination. They think themselves enjoyers, but they are not the supreme enjoyer. Here it is clearly stated that the supreme enjoyer is the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his different manifestations and plenary expansions as Narayana, Vasudeva, etc. The devotees can constantly think of the object of worship, the Supreme Lord, in any of his features. Narayana, Narayan, Krishna, Rama, etc., by chanting Hare Krishna. This practice purifies, and due to constant chanting at the end of our lives, we will be transferred to the kingdom of God. Yoga practice is meditation on the super soul within. Similarly, by chanting Hare Krishna, one fixes his mind always on the Supreme Lord. The mind is fickle, and therefore it is necessary to engage the mind by force to think of Krishna. One example often given is that of the caterpillar that thinks of becoming a butterfly and so is transformed into a butterfly in the same life. Similarly, if we constantly think of Krishna, it is certain that at the end of our lives we shall have the same bodily constitution as Krishna. Bodily constitution means having a transcendental body, a spiritual body, as opposed to being spiritual souls that are stuck in physical temporary bodies in a physical temporary world full of contaminations and lust and envy and wickedness and ignorance. With that, we stop under 45 minutes. Very nice. We'll see you hopefully next week to continue the next verse cluster in chapter 8. Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Hashtag as it is. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jai Shri Vaishnava. Jai Shri Vaishnavi.